Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Mars, host of the SOS, this shout out show. I hope you're having a wonderful day. You know what today is, brothers and sisters? It's not Thursday, it is Throwback Thursday. And I'm glad you can make it. We got a fun topic on deck for you. Listen, if you're on the show for the first time, I tell folks, bear with us. We have a little format thing that we're doing. And I just want you to know, because I want you to hang in for a little bit, because this is a great topic. I don't think we actually done it in 400 some shows. But this topic just came to me. I was watching a video. I really have this thing about watching, or I like to say watching the progression of something happen in the community, whether it's music, whether it's poetry, whether it's medicine. And so this topic was really, really fun to me because at some point in time, you're going to find yourself in one of these conversations. And it doesn't even have, you don't have to be black or white, but you're going to find yourself in a conversation. That conversation is when old folks talk about the old days. Again, I said old folks talk about the old days. Listen to my language, brothers and sisters. I did not say elders. I did not say pioneers. I said old folks. Old folks connote history, movement, and progression. History, movement, and progression. And you can tell by the experiences that they've been through that they've been here a long time. However, that long time is almost a mythical type of idea because you have to understand that they've been through things. At 54 years old, if I start talking about the old days, I'm going to wind up in hip hop. The old days, I'm going to wind up in the 70s. The old days, I'm going to wind up maybe 2 years after, 2 years before King was murdered. Those are old days you remember. So I'm basically a late 60s, 70s baby. When you start talking about the old days, there's characteristics about being in those times. It has an element of strength, has an element of resilience, it has an element of creativity, has an element of faith, and it also have an element of innovation, but also storytelling. The old days manifest in what you hear in music and things like that, and it was a simpler time. And that simpler time had to do with the fact that the laws, if you will, the culture, if you will, was spent a certain way. But the people of these times, when they start talking about the old days, it is kind of fun. And I'm only bringing it up because at some point in time, brothers and sisters, the people that we talk about the old days or take us back talking about the old days, you know what? They're going to move on. And we won't have the general stories or the genuine stories that we've been used to, that I've been spoiled to. Having my mom come on and talk about what she talks about, my aunt talk about what they talk about. But, they came from a situation, and one of the fun times and one of the probably the most traumatic times as a young man was I had to take my aunt down to Danville, Virginia. And on the ride down to Danville, me and my cousin Jane would have to listen to them reminisce about the old days. And we sat there helpless with our seat belts and no cotton for the ears. And we heard every story, every story, every anecdote, every truth, every lie they could come up with for that whole 279 miles going down south. But as you pulled into Danville, the stories became more and more readily available because you could roll down the window and they would see somebody that they grew up. Bobby Ray, Maurice, my Uncle Earl, Uncle June, the people who made these stories real. And, for my mom and my aunt, they left Danville, Virginia, and went to school at Howard University. And going to D.C. back then, that was the big days. I mean, those were the big cities back then. They went to D.C. and they left Danville to make good for themselves. My aunt became a lawyer. My mom worked for civil service. She got her law degree. All these things are great. But if you put them in a room, brothers and sisters, if you put them in a room with like-minded individuals, with like-minded experiences, somebody's going to say, you got your law degree, you got your advanced degree, you're a doctor. But then somebody's going to say 3 words: we country folks. We are country folks. And I'm telling everybody, my father he was a deputy director of personnel at NIH, but he was raised by country folks from South Carolina. And you never forget that, brothers and sisters. And even when I talk to him now, he can tell me the stories that he used to hear, the stories of my grandfather's brothers who came up to DC pursuing things, and it's a fascinating thing. But it is a dying tradition because we don't have these stories archived. We just got so used to them. Literally, myself, you start believing, brothers and sisters, they're going to be around forever. All we're left with is the memories. So today, we're going to have a little fun on Throwback Thursdays, and we're going to talk about when old folks talk about the old days. Let's get the show started. Shout out, show. Welcome back, everybody. This is Preacher Moss, the host of the SOS. Hope you're having a great day. I want to get to it. If you're coming to the show for the first time, listen carefully. What you can do is don't be a wallflower. Get in the comment section, introduce yourself, let us know what you're talking about. We say keep it classy, keep it polite, keep it classy. Tell us what you're about, and the people in the comment section are going to tell you what they're about. Those people are a group of people I'm going to get to in just a moment. But for yourself, coming on the show for the first time, enjoy yourself. If you don't mind, you know what? Click the notification button, the like button, the subscribe button. We're at 166. We're trying to get to 167 before the end of the week. Inshallah. I throw that out. So I also want to make sure that you're aware that when we have these shows like we're about to have now, it is an opportunity not just for you to listen to me, but to reflect. Not just to hear what I'm saying, but there'll be comments that will be coming because it's going to trigger a lot of thoughts. Hear me now. It's going to trigger a lot of thoughts. You're going to start thinking about your aunties and your grandfathers and your grandmothers and great aunties and things like that. You know, when we start talking about back in the day, you have women who were aunties. They weren't even related to your family. You just knew them that long, and you gave them auntie titles. So this is what we're gonna go with this. This is so far away from what you're seeing right now with the news, with the pandemic, and things like that. This is meant to be sort of like a fun show. All right. So I've laid that out for you. Now I'm going to do the next thing, which is important. I gotta give some love to the stars in the building. These are stars in the building, better known as the Shout Out Show family or the Shout Out Show soldiers. So these group of people have been riding with the Shout Out Show since the beginning of the beginning. They ace one from day one. That's why they were my ace ones from day one. Been coming on the show, supporting us. And it's not enough to just mention their names, but to let you know why we appreciate them so much. And hopefully you can be one of those people. If you come on a Shout Out Show, we'll give you some love and we'll make you an honorary Shout Out Show person today. But these people, they make the show what it is. You know why? Because these people, in their own way, in the Shout Out Show tradition, they can actually tell you about what? The old days of the Shout Out Show. They have DNA knowledge of the show, the way it used to be to where it is now. So without further ado, let's get our stars in the building. First up, we got Sister Reed. Just so you know, Sister Reed is the craft services director for the Shout Out Show. She's responsible for all dietary needs of the host. That's me, Preacher Moss. Make sure I get good nutrition to make sure that I'm strong for the show. Sister Reed, we hope you're doing well. Peace and blessings to you and your family. Good to see you on the show. Next up, we have the Canadian ambassador show, my main man, Altaf Rashid, coming all the way from Canada to make sure that the quality of the show is sufficient, not only for the American side, but also for the Canadian side. I'd say he's always on time. It's 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down. Altaf, again, brother, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I like to, you know what, because Altaf can probably talk to this whole aspect of, when old folks talk about the old days. I've been in some spaces where people start talking about the old days. They're talking about back in their old countries. They're not here. They come from other countries, and the experiences are different. The culture imperative is something that you really want to take a close look at because it's fascinating when you think about it. When you leave one place and come to another place, or you come to another place and you have to switch up your, not so much switch up your values, but you're fighting to keep what you think is culturally relevant, your beliefs, your sensibilities. It's a interesting thing, even though sometimes it's just heck of funny. Next up, we got my main man, Adam Khan. Adam Khan knows exactly what I'm talking about on this show. Adam's people come out of Trinidad. I know they got stories. When we're talking about when old folks, I didn't say seniors. I did not say seniors or senior citizens or pioneers. I'm talking about old folks. And you know why they know why they're old folks? They tell you they're old. That's what I like. They'll tell you that they're old. So, Adam, I think you might like this story when old folks talk about the old days. First of all, if you are young in a room when they get ready to talk about the old days, let me tell you something you should do. Find a corner, sit down and shut up. That conversation is not about you. When they reference you, it's probably going to be insulting because they're talking about your group, your class of young people. Young people, when old folks start, it is not a compliment when they start talking about you. They have had caucuses and they sit back and when they turn the world over to young folks, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get dogged. All right, Adam, thanks for coming on the show. Next up, we got, of course, we have our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Sister. So Whitfield is working the ones and the twos, make sure the production is right. I know we have some other people out watching in the show that will get in it. They might get into the comment section later. But without further ado, brothers and sisters, let's get to the topic at hand. When old folks talk about the old days, they are not referencing young folks. They don't want to hear nothing from you. It's nothing you contributed. It's nothing that you know that's good. You can be a Rhodes Scholar, but to an old folks person, if you don't know about where they came from, it don't matter. You dumb as a doornail, they're going to let you know. They'll tell you got book knowledge, but you ain't got street knowledge. Things like that. When old folks get to talk, brothers and sisters, in the old days, there might be some alcohol involved. It might be some alcohol involved, but it's going to be a story. It's going to be a narrative. And that story usually follows the same thing. When old folks talk, it always starts out with a compelling question. Y'all remember when? Because they old folks, you got to help them remember. Y'all remember when? And when you hear y'all remember when, if you're under the age of 60, 65, go over in the corner and sit down. This conversation not for you. They're going to let you view it, but you cannot join. They're going to let you view, but you cannot join. They ask questions, but these questions are rhetorical in nature. Everybody knows the answer. Y'all remember? Mm-hmm. Y'all remember what? Mm-hmm. They all know. And this trip down memory lane, brothers and sisters, it's a beautiful trip. And it also takes on, I talk about this, and just think about it. It does take on some very, very important aspects of the old days, because the old days are very important days in terms of how life evolved after that. I was talking to Sister Satana, I was trying to tell her that Washington D.C. for most purposes, for most purposes, intensive purposes, D.C. was a southern town. Like people migrated to Washington D.C. The cops who the white cops that came to D.C. because remember D.C. was not, they didn't have a black mayor, it's still not a state, but they were bringing the cops from West Virginia. Imagine this: black people coming up south and West Virginia people coming to be police officers, of course, to keep the black folk in check. Very important thing. And if you think about it, most of black life, they say almost 80% of African Americans at the turn of the century in the 1900s were below the Mason-Dixon line. Meaning this whole idea coming up north is not what you think. They were in these spaces, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Virginia, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, even over a little bit west, Texas, Louisiana. They were in this holding pattern till the 1900s. So when they move up and they start telling these stories, I'm just giving you guys a little understanding how the seasonings that go along with these stories. The seasoning. Some people went all the way up to Chicago. Some people went all the way up. When I went to school at Marquette University, Milwaukee, funny story, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean about the crafting of the story. Or the crafting when old people talk about the old days. First of all, when they talk about the old days, they're not talking about you. If you're a young person sitting in front of a person about to talk about the old days, he's going to look right past you. He might tell you to move to speak to his crowd. But I remember when I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for the first time, and I didn't realize how much of a Southern influence Milwaukee had with Black folks. Like, people moved to Chicago, and then the people were really, bold. Chicago to me was a Southern town. I've said this before. Milwaukee was a Southern town. Indiana, Southern town. A lot of people don't realize the Midwest for Black folks, very Southern town. Okay. So I want to show you guys something, and I just want to bring it into view for you guys. And this is the idea that a story can have a lot of information in it. It can have logistical information in it. It can have comedy in it. It can have religion in it. It can have social standing in it. It can have all these things, security in it. So I found this clip, and I just think it's a hilarious clip. So let me just say that first of all. But I think it's important that we look at it for what it is. Now, first of all, you got to look at how the guys are dressed. Okay, you can look at how they're dressed. This is obviously happening in a church, but it's not a church service. I could tell that it's not a church service. It's sort of like a church event, maybe on a Saturday night, and they brought these guys in. But it is classic. So I want you to watch this and take it in and appreciate it just a little bit, okay? So let me cue it up.
We're going to take you back. Now, I know some of y'all born and raised here in Maryland, but I know we got some country folks in here from South Carolina. Now, I want to ask y'all some questions. Can I take you back to my childhood days? See, I come out of a family, it was 13 of us. And I remember, now if y'all...
Okay, let me jump in here. When they take you back and they talk about their families, they never had small families, okay? They never had small families. They were like, I'll come out of a family. It was 211 of us, 199 boys, and the rest was girls. They never have small families. I remember going down south. I'm an only child. They were like, I showed up and the kids were like, where the rest of your family? I'm like, this is me. They were like, you mean you sleep by yourself? I'm like, so I had to throw that out there. A, families were huge. B, outside of being huge, you're going to catch the rest of it. I'm going to put them back up here, but I had to laugh about that. They never had small families, and they always ask questions. And asking a question, brothers and sisters, is not to annoy you. It's politeness. Did you dig that? It's politeness. And I love this part. He asked the crowd, may I ask you a question? And this is something like the old call and response, but it's a beautiful thing. It's subtle. It's very, very subtle. So I hope you guys appreciate the way I did.
I remember that. I want you to raise your hand. I don't know about in Maryland or Washington, but I remember when we used to walk out our door and didn't have to lock your door. I remember on Sunday morning, I never heard that word, do you feel like going to church? My daddy, come down a little bit, fella, come down a little bit. My daddy called you one time. Next time you hear some footsteps. See, God been good to me. I didn't have a bed by myself, 3 of us in one bed. Come on, somebody. Then, when we get out of church, Mama, you know, they don't use no apron no more now because they don't be in there long enough. But Mama used to put on an apron and she be standing around in the kitchen. We had that old big wood stove. And while she was cooking, she would make a big pitcher of cold Kool-Aid. Can I take you back? Can I take you back? Let's go back. Y'all listen to me. Take me back to my childhood days. We had fun the old time way. There were no drugs in our world. We had fun playing with the boys and girls. Somebody ought to take me back to my childhood days. We really had fun. We had fun. The old time way. There were no drugs. There were no drugs in our world. In our world. Oh, we had fun, y'all. We had fun playing with them. Listen, boys and girls. On Sunday morning, we were out of our bed. We took our bath. Mama combed our head. Away to church, we all would go. The entire family seeking God for more. Somebody ought to take me back to my childhood days. We really had fun. We had fun. The old time way. There were no drugs. There were no drugs in our world. In our world. Oh, we had fun, y'all. We had fun playing with. Can I say it one more time? On Sunday morning, we were out of our bed. We took our bath. Mama combed our head. Away to church, we all would go. The entire family seeking God for more. Somebody ought to take me back to my childhood days. We really had fun. We had fun. The old time way. There were no drugs. There were no drugs in our world. In our world. Oh, we had fun, y'all. We had fun. Listen. Play with the boys and girls. Mama with her apron wrapped around her waist, standing with a pitcher cold Kool-Aid.
Oh, I'm so thirsty.
Cooking in the oven.
I'm hungry too.
Just about done. We were fighting. We were having fun. Somebody ought to take me back to my childhood days. We really had fun. We had fun. The old time way. There were no drugs. There were no drugs.
All right, brothers, this is all right. I had to jump off that a little bit. And here's another thing. You know that it's old time, and that band is a lot of local guys because there was too many people in the band. Like if they got paid $50, everybody went home with like $3.40. That's that was when they said going back. That's when you had local bands, you had local singers, you had local gospel singers. I just want to know, I want to catch you up on that. So just think about that a little bit. The things he was talking about, it's archival type of stuff. Walaikum assalam rahmatullahi barakatuh. What's going on, brother Eric? Thank you so much for coming on the show. Mama Moss, hi from real live old folk. I thought I saw you in the audience there. I thought I saw Mama Moss in the audience there. I was looking for you on those. I was looking for. So Tana did all of the fashion for the band and put them in the overalls. I never seen overalls with the bow tie in a long time, brothers and sisters. I'm gonna just throw that back. Okay, Adam said when old folks talk, and I was a kid hanging around, I was told go and play big people talking. All right, okay. If there was space in the house, we'd go somewhere, Adam. But a lot of times they be telling you stay here, you might learn something. And I think it was also the fact they didn't want you to hear something and tell it to somebody else. So you had to stay there. Okay, old time folks, no more. Rest in peace. Kenneth Kwanda, founder member of Father Zambia. Okay, all right. And, and it's interesting. My grandfather used to wear overalls. My uncle Duncan used to wear overalls. Down in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I know some people are like, is preacher making that up? No, it's a place called Orangeburg, South Carolina, home of South Carolina State, a well-known HBCU. But you see, we're bringing up all this. Satana, where your people from? She don't want to tell us. She's shy. Because they just didn't show up from Newark. They ain't just show up from Georgia and South Carolina. I could tell. I know Satana people came from down south, because they got twins. You ain't never hear about twins up north till black folk bought them from down south. Satana her family has like 15 sets of twins. You know why? Because nobody want to be outdone. I got twins, you gonna have twins. All right. So Mama Moss actually jumped on there. Her story, my Aunt Maxine's story, my mom's story was interesting because in Danville, Virginia, they had a social center called it was Bethel Burgers. They owned a store where they cooked burgers. People came, they had a jukebox. So it was like this cultural center in the middle of Danville. And that really established them as a family. A family that not only served food and cooked food, but also a family that understood early the idea of entrepreneurial expression. So a lot of times, the old days, when you go down to Danville, people talk about my grandfather's name was Lafayette Bethel. They talk about Beth's store. So, and it was interesting because I used to get a little hype because I was a Bethel, even though my last name was Moss. I get a little shine. But I think, brothers and sisters, this whole idea of when old folks talk on a serious side, they're not talking as much because you know what? They get called home and we forget a lot of times. They get called home in these stories that are so important and so vital to us that we don't write them down. It's not like the slave, the recordings of slaves and things like that. These are people who have, for lack of a better word, this really amazing connection to history. And I didn't think about that until actually I've been thinking about it, but it was just think about this for a minute. 30 years ago today, South Africa removed its last apartheid laws. 30 years ago. And when I was in South Africa on my morning run, when I was in Johannesburg, I used to run past Nelson Mandela's house. Like, he had a house in town. I know he had a bunch of houses, but I would run past his house and I would sit and, when you would run, you go, now there's a guy that just has his idea of when old folks talk about the old days is totally different than what they were talking about. He didn't even see his old days for 27 years. His old days were in a prison. His old days was incarceration. His old days were rife with fighting and being a freedom fighter. As we talk about him being a freedom fighter, we were looking to vote, but we had culture, we had education, we had economic opportunities and economic outlets, if you will. When I was in South Africa, it was really interesting, and I don't want to digress, talk about the old days. But I was hip to this because I was pretty naive. A brother told me about apartheid, and I was thinking, you're thinking it's separation, da da da. And I asked the guy who was driving me, I said, "Is this your business? Is this driving business your business?" He looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, "No." And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, "You do a great job. If it's not your business, you should start your own business." And he looked at me and he says, "Let me explain to you about apartheid." He said, "You are American. You get what you can get." He's the old days what apartheid was. Not only was it legal apartheid in terms of where you live, there was legal apartheid in terms of education. And he said in the old days, what they did was made sure that they trained Black South Africans to be good employees. They trained out the idea that you can run your own business, that you can be your own entrepreneur. So, like when I watched The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, I smiled because this is a guy who thought differently as a comedian. But he said, we're not allowed really to have businesses. Other cultures come in that look like us, like Nigerians can come in and start businesses, but South Africans cannot start businesses. And so when I tell you, the guy talking about Take Me Back, his childhood, I mean, we all have varying stories and varying accountings of how we grew up. But sometimes, you know what? It is worth the price of admission to hear other people talk about going back to the old days. So listen, we're out of time. And I hope I took you back. And next week's Throwback Thursday, I'm sure will be a lot different. But I just wanted to, for one, thank you for the people who were willing to take us back to the old days. Let me give appreciation for that. And even more importantly, to remind us even more about what their challenges were and inspire us. Because the old days, actually, when you hear about it and your mind is right, they inspire you. I've been inspired by these stories about when they take me back. So, and some of it was funny and we could smile. But to come through a struggle, and still have the moral center to be able to talk to young folks like myself and say, this is what we went through, but you don't have to go through that anymore. I'm going to give you this information. So taking us back and things like that, there's a whole, especially in the United States and African-American culture, there's so much there, such a rich tradition. I mean, I went back with a lot of jazz musicians back in the day, and they would tell me these things about how music allowed them to grow and go out of the country and see other parts of the world, and then come back and tell other folks, hey man, this is how they live it. And these people over here love us. While these people here don't love us, these people over here love us. And that was the whole idea of being otherworldly. I mean, the religion of Islam, even through the Nation of Islam, was somehow you had this portal to go overseas. You had a connection to your Arab brothers. You had a connection to the Asiatics, and we were the Asiatic black man. You had that connection, the idea that we were part of the world. So I'm going to close out on that. Let me get to my sponsors. I am over. I apologize. I want to give a shout out to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Take a note, brothers and sisters. The new telephone number is 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. Make sure you check it out. Operators are waiting. You give a call and you'll get a call back. If you don't get a call direct, you get a call back, and we call her the Harriet Tubman of Financial Advising, Maxine BK Esquire. She'll be more than happy to talk to you about your financial options and possibilities. We're going to give a shout out also, brothers and sisters, to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Again, that's Bayan Islamic Graduate School. If you're interested in a quality graduate level Islamic experience, you can look at the Masters of Divinity. You could be a chaplain. You can get a master's for Islamic leadership, Islamic studies, Or like myself, I got mine in Islamic education. But my point of the matter is you can take these things and increase your skill and really go out and be effective using religion, using, I want to say, not just religion, but using reasoning. Because I always believe true religious education is supposed to help everybody, not just people who are in your religion. So think about that. I'm out of here. You guys are amazing. God bless. We will talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. Satana, take me back to my childhood days. There you are. I know you're looking at your screen going, that's a good looking black man. And you're right. I'm Preacher Moss, and you're not. Today, I want to talk about Olive Branch Muslim Family Services, better known as the people who help people. And I need you to help the people who help people so they can continue to, you guess it, help people. Get it? Got it? Good. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Graphic now.